Hey, how are we doing? It's Ben here, and today we'll be taking a look at what RAID is, the different types of RAID, and which one you should use for your CCTV setup. If you're new to this channel and like what you see here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and follow us on our socials to stay up to date with the latest network tips, news, and reviews designed to save you time. At EQL, we're always here to help and support your business. Now, let's get right into this. So, what exactly is RAID? RAID stands for Redundant Array of Independent Disk and is an important function known as fault tolerance. So fault tolerance simply refers to a system's ability to remain functional or operative without any interruption after experiencing a failure with some of its components. I guess a common example of fault tolerance is backup generators or uninterrupted power supplies, such as a UPS for short. They serve the purpose of providing power to a system in the event of a power outage. The same concept can be applied to a RAID, except RAID is used to prevent data loss. In a RAID setup, data is copied to multiple drives or disks, so that in the event of a disk failure, no data will be lost. There are several different RAID types. However, in this video, we're covering some of the most commonly used RAID types. So that'd be RAID 0, 1, 5, 6, and 10. So let's start with RAID 0. So I'm not sure why RAID 0 is considered a RAID type, as it has no fault tolerance. And it also increases the chances of data loss because the data is not backed up. If you know why, please let us know in the comment sections below. So RAID 0 works by data being striped across two separate disks. However, considering RAID 0 is not fault tolerant, if a single drive fails, all data is lost. The only benefit of using RAID 0 is an increase in speed, as the two control disks are basically operating simultaneously instead of one. So now, RAID 1. In a RAID 1 setup, data is duplicated or mirrored between two disks, making it fault tolerant. This means that if disk 1 or disk 2 fails, the remaining disks will still have a duplicate copy of the data, preventing data loss. The downside of using RAID 1 is that there is a decrease in write speeds, as data is required to be duplicated between the two drives. Also, the combined total of disk storage capacity is reduced by 50%, as data is required to be written twice for mirroring. So if you have two 1 terabyte disks equating to 2 terabytes, you'll only be able to use 1 terabyte worth of storage. So now let's look at RAID 5. For RAID 5 setup to work, 3 or more disks are required. RAID 5 functions by having data striped across multiple disks with information known as parity. Parity is distributed evenly across all the disks. This is what is used to rebuild data in the event of a disk failure. However, the disadvantages of using a RAID 5 setup is that its requirements for the equivalent of entire disk worth of storage to be dedicated to the parity. So this reduces the collective amount of storage for data. For example, if you have 4 1 terabyte disks equating to 4 terabytes worth of storage, 1 terabyte will be dedicated to parity, leaving you only 3 terabytes worth of space to store your data. Also, parity in RAID 5 is only able to rebuild data if a single disk fails. So if two disks happen to fail at the same time, which is very rare, then all the data is lost. So now with RAID 6. So RAID 6 works similar to RAID 5 with a few differences. For RAID 6 to function, a total of 4 disks or more are required. RAID 6 also uses parity. However, instead of having a single disk worth of storage for parity, it requires 2 whole disks worth of storage. For example, if you have 4 terabyte disk equating to 4 terabytes worth of storage, 2 terabytes of storage will be dedicated to parity, leaving only 2 terabytes worth of storage left to store your data. So this is to prevent data loss in the event that 2 disks fail at the same time. So now we look at RAID 10. So RAID 10 is a combination of RAID 1 and RAID 0, hence the name RAID 10. For a RAID 10 setup to work, a minimum of 4 disks is required as well. The way RAID 10 functions is by initially having data striped between two drives using RAID 0, followed by the data being mirrored using RAID 1. This provides the benefit of having the fault tolerance of RAID 1 and the speed of RAID 0. The downside to using RAID 10 is that you can only use 50% of the total capacity of your drives for storage. So if you're using 4 identical drives, you can only use 2 for the actual storage. Also, if 2 disks in the same mirrored pair fail, all the data will be lost because there's no parity in the striped sets. So what RAID setup should we use for your CCTV system? Well, that comes down to your budget. I guess the number of cameras you have installed, the type of NVR you have, and the amount of data you intend to throughput onto your disk. Also, just to note, if you're planning on using a RAID setup specifically for CCTV surveillance, be sure to purchase the correct hardware such as the hardware. I'm going to get this. So it's hard drives. Is that right? It's hard drives, which basically are like a Western Digital or a Seagate Skyhawk. These hard drives have been designed to be written over and over again. If you want to know more about storage options for CCTV, be sure to check out a video on CCTV storage options. We'll put a link to it in the descriptions below. Also, on another side note, when building a RAID setup, it is also important to consider whether you need to purchase a high-end RAID controller and how much RU rack units you're going to need. So when you plan on installing this RAID into a rack, RAID racks can span from say 1 to 4 RU depending on your setup, and will be basically an additional cost to take into account when doing your cost analysis. Ideally, you want to choose the most optimal RAID option for your specific use. The best RAID type for surveillance purposes, in our opinion, is RAID 6, and it's because of the following reason. So number one, its redundancy with striping reduces the need for hot swapping, which can sometimes cause other drives to fail during the data rebuild process. So this sometimes can occur in RAID 5. Next one is the endurance of disk lifespan in comparison to, say, other RAID types. The others is cheaper in the long term when we take into account all the extra maintenance costs. It also has an excellent read performance. RAID 6 is 6 times faster than standard read speeds, and RAID 10 in comparison to RAID 6 is approximately 1/3 slower. So in conclusion, all in all, planning and research prior to building a surveillance system is key to ensuring that you get the best optimal performance and best bang for your buck. The last thing you want to do is spend additional time, money, and effort trying to rectify the purchase of equipment that was either incompatible or not optimal for your specific use. Well, that's it for this video. If you have any questions, let us know in the comment sections below. If you already haven't subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button and follow us on our socials to stay up to date with the latest network tips, news, and reviews designed to save you time. At EQL, we're always here to help and support your business.